Hey, authors, welcome to Author Nation. This is the Author Nation interview show, and we do this every Thursday at noon Pacific time. I am Melody Ann, your host, and I'm also the founder of Author Nation, a membership community for nonfiction authors who want to be successful authors. Today, this is I love today because today I'm interviewing someone who writes cozy mysteries, and I happen to love cozy mysteries. So this is something that's, really special to me. And today I'm interviewing Andrea Johnson, who holds an MFA in writing popular fiction from Seton Hill University and a copy editing certification from UC San Diego. Her craft and lifestyle essays have been appeared on several websites such as Crime Reads, Lit Reactor, DIY MFA, Submittable, Funds for Writers, The List Daily, and Pop Sugar. Andrea has also created a series of productivity books for fiction writers and is the author of the Victoria Justice Mysteries. Welcome, Andrea.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm warm and cozy. It's supposed to snow today. I've gotten all my groceries, so I'm feeling good. And yeah, this is the perfect sort of end to the day.
That's brilliant. So I have a question about being cozy. What's your favorite kind of cozy activity? If you were going to sit down with your own cozy mystery, where would you read it? What would be your cozy spot?
Oh gosh, I am very fortunate in the sense that I grew up in a home that had an actual wood burning fireplace. So whenever I hear the word cozy, that's what I think of. Sitting in front of the fireplace with a nice mug of hot chocolate snuggled up with a perfect book.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. That's a good cozy spot. I love it. Great place to read a book or write a book for that matter. But you actually didn't start out as like a fiction writer. You started out as a court reporter. So can you tell us something about that?
Well, a court reporter, just in case people don't know, is the person in the front of the courtroom who sits in front of that tiny little machine and takes the verbatim record of what's going on in the courtroom. And so that profession for me was my first foray into writing. I wasn't brave enough as a little girl to get into writing because the idea of coming up with ideas seemed fun and easy, but the writing of the dialogue seemed very difficult to me. So I did get an English degree, but I went on to use that English degree to get into court reporting. But once I got into court reporting and saw how language isn't as definitive as it is in the movies. There's starts, there's stops, there's hiccups, there's interruptions. And so you can play with that dynamic as a writer. You can make it pristine. We see a lot of pristine writing, but you can also make it fun and musical. It's almost like jazz. It's improvisational. And so once I was a court reporter for many years and started taking down other people's words, I'm like, I can do this on my own. So I eventually moved away from court reporting and began writing.
I actually love that lesson right there. Okay, this is just going to be jam-packed full. I can see it. I love that lesson right there, right? When we're writing dialogue, we think it has to be perfect. And real dialogue is anything but perfect. Thank you. That right there was gem. So I'm assuming court isn't as exciting in the real world as it is on television. It's long days, I'm guessing.
Long days indeed, and your guess is absolutely correct. I mean, I don't want to break anyone's fantasy, but it is true. It's very much like going into a business office because everyone there wants to get in, do what they have to do, and get out. And there's such volume. Really isn't time for the sort of big surprises and the interruptions that you see on television. So as a writer, because we haven't quite talked about it yet, but I think it's apparent by anybody who is familiar with my Victoria Justice series, that is a story about a court stenographer. I based a lot of that on the interactions I had as a court reporter. And as writers, when you look at that court situation that is very staid, is very businesslike, is very formal, people use the Robert's Rules of Order in the courtroom. So it's very formal. But as a writer, you have to find what's interesting about that. You have to find those big moments. So a lot of my story actually deals with the jury or the interactions of the attorneys outside of the courtroom where they can really argue. Because in the courtroom, the judge is the ruler. He says, no, don't stop. I'm going to throw you out because you're in contempt. But when the attorneys are on their own, sort of negotiating and bargaining and deciding how they're going to take their directions with the case, that can be really contentious. And so you got to pick and choose when you think about the world of the courtroom. Otherwise, you end up with something really boring.
Yeah, no, that's excellent observation. I've been in a courtroom and it's just not as exciting as it is on TV. And if you are out there watching, please feel free to drop a comment or ask a question as we go. There is a lot more coming up. So there must be some moments of kind of crazy or exciting in the courtroom. Did you have any, do you have any stories that it's just like there's that, that moment of, is this really happening in the courtroom?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, it's a really controlled environment. I mean, you have people in there with guns. You have the bailiff. You have the prison guards. You have the security team for the courthouse. But what I will say, because we do all love a little bit of salaciousness, the cases themselves are often very interesting, because I worked in a high court. I worked in superior court. So those would be civil cases, but the criminal cases were the tough ones, your rapes, your kidnappings, your murders, your death penalty cases. So I saw a lot of that stuff. And I can tell you stories about cases where a woman goes to the casino, she comes out with her winnings, she's kidnapped, thrown into her trunk, while the men ride around town spending her money. So imagine hearing that testimony. That's very salacious, but the actual, as the witness tells the story, yes, that's exciting. You can feel yourself doing this, even though you can't as a court reporter, remain neutral. But the courtroom itself is quiet during this. Everyone has to maintain a certain decorum. I mean, I can tell you about other cases where a man killed his wife and chopped her up and put her in a cooler. I mean, so we hear all kinds of horrible things because life can be horrible, but we have to maintain that certain decorum. So the answer to your question is yes and no.
Yeah, it sounds like, murder told in a mundane fashion almost, right? Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's I hate to say it this way, because this then makes me feel like I'm presenting the whole world of the legal system as being very cold. But
oh no,
if you allow any of it to affect you in a way where it does affect you when you go home at night, it affects you. But if you allow in the moment for it to affect you in any way, it does color the case, because you remember you have the jury there, that body of people who are going to decide the fate of the defendant, and innocent until proven guilty, whether we like it or not. And so you don't want to allow that to any emotion that you may have about what you're hearing to color anything. So as court reporters, remain neutral. The attorneys, even though you see it a lot on TV, they don't badger witnesses because they can't. It's all about presenting the information to the jury and allowing them to decide. And so unfortunately, even though something is horrible, it's business as usual.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense. And I want to move into the books. And I just want to say that Judy Duvall has said, loved book 1. So just so you know, yes, somebody's coming out to say, and I think that's wonderful. I love it. So if you're out there watching, we want more of that, and questions, ask away. Thank you, Jude, for speaking up and saying how wonderful the books are. Yes. And let's talk about the book. So Victoria Justice, this is the character. Can you tell us a little bit about this series?
Yes, this is sort of my take on a legal thriller, but a legal thriller starring court reporters instead of attorneys. It's a series that asks the question, what if the court stenographer decides to take the law into her own hands and solve the crime? So the book opens giving you the standard life of Victoria. She's a bit of a quiet soul in the sense that she's an orphan. She's been adopted. She grew up being bullied, and she finds the world of court reporting as sort of her solace, in the sense that she can sit there and be around people, but she doesn't have to interact with them because that's not part of her mainframe. It's not part of her makeup. And then all of a sudden, she is thrust into these series of mysteries where she not only has to solve the mysteries to help her friends, she has to find her own voice. So I'm very glad that there is someone out there. And I know Jude, thank you so much for coming, who really, that really resonated with them when they read the books. So.
Yeah. No, I love that character. What a great character synopsis. Thank you so much for that. I want to ask what a cozy mystery is, because there are so many different types of mysteries. And if you're really into mystery, you'll know exactly what a cozy is versus something else. But for you, just what is a cozy mystery?
Well, a cozy mystery is defined in a very general way as a mystery where the crime is bloodless or it happens off stage and there is little to no sex or violence. It's more about the puzzle than it is about the grit, if that makes sense. And so these are stories that are meant to be heartwarming because justice is always going to prevail in the end. It's not like a crime novel or a detective novel where the ending could sort of be ambiguous. You definitely have justice prevailing and the world going back to normal. So often in cozies, you have a very small town or a microcosm within a bigger city so that people who read these books come back to that same familiar set of characters.
Yeah. And so do you want the readers to solve the mystery before they get to the end? Or are you hoping that they get that surprise, or does it not matter?
Well, that's a very good question, because it really does depend on what kind of story you're writing. Now, if you are definitively writing a cozy mystery, then it's all about the puzzle. And the old adage is you want the reader to recognize who the killer is a page and a half before the detective does. And that's some arbitrary rule that writers made a long time ago. But in my book, anytime you can get to the end of your story, to that final act, and still have the puzzle sort of working for the audience, and then sometime right before the showdown, they figure it out, whether it be before or after the sleuth, no matter, they figure it out, you've succeeded. Because for cozies, it's about the puzzle. Something like a thriller, you don't have that luxury. You always have to give a twist right up until the last page, right up until the last word. Thrillers are almost defined by their plot twists. But cozies, it's just about giving someone a puzzle until you reveal the murderer.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks, Jude. I love you. She says, I love solving a mystery, but never do. So yeah. Jude, I feel you. I have that same thing when sometimes you get to the end, you're like, wait, what? You have to go back and figure it out. Oh, I see. Now I see it. And I think that's partly because there are clues kind of, dropped along the way. And sometimes as readers, we pick them up. And sometimes as readers, we get so sucked in that we're not even looking at the clues. We're just like along for the ride. And so if you are along for the ride and you're like maybe not picking up all the clues, I just think that means you're loving what you read. What do you think, Andrea?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Jude is actually a fantastic crime writer in his own right. So,
Jude's right.
So to say that, he's picking up information to form his own masterpiece is what it is. Like he's looking around and actually absorbing. And I think that's if we're talking about takeaways, that's a great takeaway for writers in general. Just read everything you can. Even if you don't like mysteries, read one every once in a while, because you may pick up something that's going to help your romance. Or if you want to get more poetic, because we were talking about Louise Penny before the show started, read a poem a day, because that'll help your language, that'll help your rhythm. So yeah, there's so much that can be gleaned from things.
Yeah, great advice. Sorry, Jude, by the way. Jude, it's one of those names. I got it wrong. I apologize. Yes, the ride is most important. Thanks, Jude. I want to talk also about your book, How to Craft a Killer Cozy Mystery. Pardon me. How to Craft a Killer Cozy Mystery. I want to talk about that book because a lot of people who watch this show, they're writers, right? They're not just readers. They're obviously readers, but they're not just readers. They're writers. And before we get in, I just want to read a little bit of a snippet from a review from Amazon. And this person said, "This book is a gold mine of information, providing a roadmap to writing a solid book, particularly one with strong mystery or suspense elements. I pre-ordered the next book in the series on writing legal thrillers." I just wanted to say that really that's brilliant. So your book, How to Craft a Killer Cozy Mystery, helps others craft mysteries like you craft mysteries. So can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Oh, well, that book is, it has cozy mysteries in the title, and that is absolutely positively the focus. But it really is a book telling you how to write mysteries in general, because in the beginning, it actually starts out talking about the history of cozy mysteries, but also how cozy is different from thrillers, how thrillers different from crime stories. And then we also go into what is suspense and how suspense is used in those three types of stories, not just in cozies. And then it also has a great glossary of just general terms. Most of them are mystery terms, but it also defines a lot of literary and narrative terms for people who are new to either the genre or new to writing. So I tried to design it as a helpful book as a whole. But for those who are interested specifically in cozies, because that's how it's billed, we talk about genre expectations for cozy mysteries. We talk about the 4-act plot structure and some of the main beats that are used in cozy mysteries. We do talk about plot twists, even though you don't necessarily need to have one in a cozy. There are ways to throw them in there if you're feeling daring. So I try to really give people a good, a narrow focus on cozies, but a broad scope on the mystery genre as a whole.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. And so let's narrow down into the cozy mystery for a minute. And each genre has its own tropes, even within mystery, as you said, right? The thriller, you need to have a twist, constantly have twists, whereas the cozy mysteries don't. So can you tell us a little bit about the tropes, like plot devices or character maps or whatever the tropes happen to be for that particular genre? Can you tell us kind of highlight a couple of them that writers need to think about if they want to write one?
Well, in terms of cozies, I would want to focus on genre expectations and this idea of fair play, because many of the other crime subgenres, you don't have to play fair with the audience. You can sometimes withhold information from them, or have the sin of omission, or blot things out by flip-flopping point of view. But in cozies, you have to play fair with the audience. You have to give them the same set of information in the same way that you give it to the sleuth, because you want them to be able to play along with the sleuth or even compete with them if that's how their mind works.
Yeah.
So cozies are almost more about what they don't do as opposed to what they do. And by that, I mean, in romance, you have things that you throw in to make it a certain kind of romance. In cozies, there are things you take out to make sure that the audience is able to play along. And when we talk about genre expectations for cozies, we talk about some things that are actually probably considered more surface, in the sense that cozies usually have a female protagonist. They're almost always amateur sleuth stories. They almost always take place in a small town or some kind of microcosm, like we talked about. The killer is always in that group of friends, maybe not necessarily in the group of friends, but you see the killer from the very beginning. You obviously don't know who it is, because cozies, again, are about the puzzle. It's a card game. It's figuring out who it is by removing cards from the deck, and then, voila, the one that's left is the killer. But there are certain things that you really have to have, otherwise people won't consider it a cozy.
Yeah. And earlier you also said you remove the violence and you remove the gore. That all happens kind of off screen, as you said. So that's another really great example of, like, what, as you said, cozies are about creating a puzzle, but then removing all the other things that other kind of mystery genres expect of an author. So if I'm reading the book, is it going to lead me through how to develop my own cozy mystery?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, as I said before, we start with all of the history and the differences, but once we finish that, we get into how you plot, because we talk about the different beats and the importance of them. Then we talk a little bit about how you're actually going to write your premise. Once you have your idea, we actually talk about idea generation as well. And then once you're started and you've got your outline, because we talk about how to get your outline together, we give you some ideas on how to edit your manuscript once you have your first draft. So
Yeah.
it really is a well-rounded look at, okay, I'm going into this. I've never completed a story before. I've written a lot of them, or maybe I've never written one before, but I'm going to be able to complete it because from start to finish, you're given the entire writing process.
Yeah. Oh, great. Okay. And Jude has a question. Do you always know it's a cozy from the moment you're outlining the novel?
Well, I don't know that everybody does. I
Mhm.
think that that does come in the pre-writing process. I mean, that's part of the process. You brainstorm the idea, you put together your premise, and once you put together your premise and you start writing a little bit, that's when you get the idea. Um,
Mhm.
Writing, it- I don't think that revision necessarily comes at the end. I think revision is re-envisioning, so it comes throughout. So I think as writers, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, once you get writing, you may have to go back and tweak things, because at that point, after writing 20 or so pages, you do realize, hey, this might not work best as a cozy. It might work best as a thriller. And it probably doesn't need to be in first person. I could probably use third and maybe have multiple point of view. So in answer to your question, Jude, no, you don't necessarily know it's a cozy up front. Me personally, when I started my particular series, Victoria Justice, once I had the idea that it was going to be a book and not something else, because there was a period there where it was going to be something else. Once I realized it was going to be a book, in my mind, it had to be a cozy, because I wanted her to be thought of as the underdog and to be a little bit more passive. And since cozies move slower, that seemed like the best way to convey that message without actually shouting those words.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've just had so much information about this book, and I love it. It's obviously really packed with lots of amazing information. And so if you want to get your own copy of Craft Your Own Killer Cozy Mystery, the link will be in the description. But Andrea, I wanted to say, so if I'm in the bookstore and I pick up the book and I'm looking at the front and the back and I'm flipping through it, and we buy books based on a promise, right? We believe we're going to get something from it. So what would be your 30-second, this is the promise of this book?
Well, I put the promise actually on the back of the book, because as a relatively new writer myself, and I confessed that early, I've really only have been writing as an adult in less than 5 years, truth be told. I wanted to write a book that would actually help other people write a book. Because when I first started writing my first book, I looked to craft books as a resource to help me complete them. And I did not find very many cozy mystery books. At the time, I only found two. Now, since then, that sort of the genre has always been there, but that niche of how to write cozy mystery books has blossomed. And there are a lot more there now than there were when I first started writing, even just 5 years ago. But at the time, there weren't very many. And so I really wanted to write a book where you could go, whether you're new to the genre or a new writer, you'd be able from start to finish use that book to help you write your own. And I say it on the back of the book. I know we're not supposed to make guarantees in life, but I guarantee you that with that book, you would be able to do it, because that's what I wanted as a writer. And part of my introduction actually goes into that, about my writing journey and how it was important to me to be able to share the knowledge that I found, because there was so little of it when I got started. And I feel that pain for other people.
Yeah. Now, I have to agree with you because I've never written fiction.
Mm.
I work with nonfiction authors. I'm all about nonfiction. I've been playing with the idea of writing a thriller. And I'm honestly, there's not tons out there for people who really want a good, solid how-to book on this. And so this is one of the reasons I'm thrilled that we're talking about this today, because I think we need really good books like this. And thank you for writing it. So I really want to talk about you're using your real life to find stories. So can you tell us a little bit about how, being a court reporter helped you develop the character, helped you find the mysteries? How did that all fit together?
Well, as I talked about earlier, and I hate to even make it sound this way, but it is. Being a court reporter is really a special profession. I'm going to use these. I didn't want to use these words, but I'm going to use them. It's almost a meditative experience in the sense that you are a conduit for other people's words. You're essentially learning a language, taking the spoken word, translating into that language that you've learned, that abbreviated language, and then translating it back into English. You're also interpreting the movement and the body language that's going on in the courtroom. Now, granted, being a court stenographer, you're not writing down emotions like he nodded his head like he was angry. You're not doing that, but you do have to interpret the language enough to know whether it's let's eat grandma versus let's eat, comma, grandma, because those sentences mean two different things, right?
Yes.
So you are interpreting language. You're doing a lot of what I think is very meditative work. And so I've started preaching about court reporting, but to get to your answer, you are listening to a lot of things that touch you in different ways, and you have to carry it with you. And that idea of creating a character who's burdened with all that, but not just burdened with it, in a way she welcomes it because her own life has been so horrible, she identifies with it and tries to find ways to remedy it, seemed like a very interesting exercise for me, particularly as a relatively new writer. And so I took my experiences as a court reporter in the sense that I do steal some of the cases, but not the cases as a whole, but parts of the cases that inspired me. Like in the first book, there was a case in the court where I worked where the cop opened up evidence and one thing was supposed to be in there, but something completely different was in the evidence. And so that just one part of the case, I took that and I helped to inspire the first book. Now, the case is about something completely different than what the book is about, but that image was so strong for me. The shock, like we were talking about in the courtroom, was so palpable because we were all shocked, but we couldn't go, right? We couldn't do any of that, but it was very palpable. The case had to stop. It had to be talked about. And I was like, well, what if? What if this was more of a scandal and this was happening and that was happening? And so the book grew out of that one image. The second book, the very same thing, not so much an image, but the thought of a guy riding around town, setting fires on his, like riding around on his bike from place to place and setting fires. That seems odd to me. If you're an arsonist, you want to get away as fast as possible, but this guy was on a bike. And so using that to inspire. So long-winded, I know, because I can talk about courtroom forever. I think it's a magnificent profession. But yes, I used parts of the cases as imagery to inspire other things. And I wanted people to know about the profession. So those were the main two reasons I wrote those books.
I love it. I love the idea of, the getaway bicycle. The image is just brilliant, right? Like, what an image. And so if you'd like to read one of Andrea's cozy mysteries, I have the link in the description as well, because they sound like so much fun. All right. So for the writers in the group, how do we go from that spark of an idea to like that real life spark to the fictionalized version? How do we get there?
Well, It's simply a process of patience. I know no one wants to hear that, but it really is. I taught a writing class at a conference once, and I gave an exercise. And in reality, it's this very simple exercise, but it's exactly what I do when I think about trying to write, whether it's a book, coming up with an idea for a book, or coming up with an idea for an article. Sit down and read something. Doesn't matter what it is. It could just be one article from the paper. Read it. What images come up from it? What words come up from it? It doesn't even have to be an image. One word, one phrase. Put that down on a piece of paper and start mind mapping. Maybe people don't know that term, but bubble mapping.
Yep.
You know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just start extrapolating from that one thing. Okay, the article was about firemen. Firemen remind me of remind me of 3-alarm chili. 3-alarm chili reminds me of a cook-off we had in town 2 weeks ago. So what if, and that's really how you get started. Once you have a seed of an idea, you get into your premise. What if at the chili cook-off, the 3 judges are poisoned? Whose chili did it? And all of a sudden you're off and running with your mystery. So it really is just about taking the time to sit and think. Let the muse come to you. And I shouldn't even use that word, but don't force this idea that things come instantaneously. You do have to mull over it. You do have to work it, sort of knead it, and eventually it'll come.
Yeah, no, that I love that. And Jude, brilliant. No one ever suspect a cyclist. That's what I was thinking, Jude. That's exactly what I was thinking. I thought it was brilliant. And Shirley May is also sending her love today. I just wanted to, hi, Shirley May. Thank you so much for watching. So we're not all court reporters, right? I've never been a court reporter. So, and newspapers, that's one place I could get ideas from. Do you have other suggestions of where we might kind of put our eyes, where we might start observing things to, generate ideas?
Well, I think mashups are beautiful. And when you just think about sitting down and start thinking about some of your favorite movies, right? You kind of have a seed of an idea, but you don't think the seed is big enough to grow anything. So say to yourself, okay, well, I want to write this love story about a girl who falls in love with a musician. But I don't really have any ideas. But I know I love that movie Pretty in Pink. So maybe I can mash Pretty in Pink up with Cinderella, or I can mash Pretty in Pink up with Showgirls, and just start thinking about what those two things mashed together would look like. And that could sort of help you get an idea that's big enough that then you can use the premise formula, because I have a premise formula in my book. Or you can use the goal, motivation, conflict formula, because when you do the goal, motivation, conflict blanks that Deborah Dixon comes up with, that can almost sometimes be your premise if you are good enough at picking out your goal, motivation, conflict. Whether you do your premise formula or you do that, maybe plugging those two ideas together with your seed will get you to the next level where you have enough to start drafting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And thank you, because what I hear is there are ideas everywhere. So just start looking around and start thinking about what you love. And when you have a seed of an idea, grab other ideas and start throwing them together to see if anything kind of hits, and then do your bubble or your mind mapping to expand it out. I love that. I love that.
Because people want to use this idea of not being able to find ideas as an excuse not to write. But really, you have to do something. The movement, the momentum itself actually ends up giving you ideas, actually ends up moving you forward. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but just as a person who started so late in life writing, I know the excuses. And I always like to try to call people on them when I see them. And this idea generation thing really is one of them, because like you said, ideas are everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you so much. You're absolutely right. It's an excuse that to let our fear get in the way, or our fear gets in the way and we need an excuse, right? However that goes. I'm not sure which way it happens, but you know what I mean. I want to go back. Earlier, Jude said, I love solving a mystery, but never do. And I want to just talk a little bit about, in Cozy Mysteries, kind of dropping in the clues. And so that, and you did give a formula, which, people can follow. It's like, I think you said like a page and a half or something like that. The reader finds out a page and a half before the investigator. But how do we drop those clues? So can you kind of fit those together for us for a little bit?
Sure. Clues can be put anywhere. I actually think they're best hidden in plain sight. I actually talk a lot in the book about several things you can do, several practical things, whether it be having a person talk about whatever the clue may be, and having them be rambling so much or talking about so many things, or maybe even unrelated, that the clue's right there. You see it, but it's in the middle of all this gobbledygook. Or maybe having the most unreliable person in the story, like the town drunk, giving that clue or that piece of information that's key, or giving the clue to the crime before the crime actually happened. So at the time that you're given this information, it seems very innocuous, right? And it isn't until way into the third or fourth act that the light bulb comes on. Right. So that's where, getting back to what you said at the top, that's how you can hide the clues in plain sight enough that the reader doesn't understand what's going on until page and a half before you give that reveal, because you're very cleverly dropping things in places they don't expect.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. You have given us so much today. This has been incredibly valuable, amazing amount of information. And thank you to people watching for dropping in your comments and your questions. I really want to ask what you're working on right now.
Well, since your audience, you have a nonfiction based audience, I will say to those fine folks that I am working on a How to Craft Killer Dialogue book that I hope will be out in November. I'm also doing a book called Mastering the Art of Suspense. I dropped the killer nomination for right now, but Mastering the Art of Suspense, and that should be out in August. And those are both how-to books. And then I'm working on a couple of romances. I know we didn't talk about how it is to write in a pandemic, but I found that writing a mystery in a pandemic is really tough. So I've moved over to romance, tough emotionally, right? Because you're writing about crimes and killings, but you have to do it in a way that's fun and light and bright-hearted. And that seemed a little forced to me. So I've moved over to romance for the time being. And I'm actually I finished one and I'm working on another. One romance that's set in Las Vegas about an older woman who's trying to find her place in life. She's an old showgirl who's lost her way. And then I'm writing another book that I hope will be a series about the backstage lives of young college students who are working on Broadway. So that should be a lot of fun. And then, of course, I have more books in the Victoria Justice Mystery Series. Deceptive Justice comes out April 5th.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. And before the show, we actually talked a little bit about, I asked you how much you write, and you're always writing. You write every day, and you're moving towards something every day. And the number of projects you just mentioned makes me think, oh, wow, yes, you are writing a lot every day. So I think that's quite amazing. And if you're out there and you want to learn more, ajthenovelist.com is the website. And Shirley May feels the same way I do. So many books. That's tons and tons of books. So we can find you at your website. We can find your books. Tell us where we can find your books and more information about you.
Well, you can find my books just in about anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Google, Apple, the bookshop.org. I know a lot of people want to support independent bookstores, so definitely go to bookshop.org. All of them are there. All of them that are out are there. And like Melody Ann said, you could check out my website or visit me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter an awful lot, and it's the same handle, AJ the Novelist.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Andrea, thank you so much for coming today and just providing so much value for the audience. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And so, sorry?
No, I was just going to say thank you for having me and putting up with my rambling there when I started talking about court reporting.
Oh, you don't ramble at all. To be honest, you don't ramble at all. All right. Just want everyone to know that we are here every single Thursday at noon. So join us next Thursday and the Thursday after that and the Thursday after that. And best way to do that is to subscribe to the channel. So I will see everyone here next Thursday. Oh, I just want to say we have Shirley May says, thank you. What a great interview. Thank you, Shirley May. Really, really appreciate your comments. So for everyone else and Shirley May, thank you so much for coming. And I look forward to seeing you next Thursday.